A lot of the time, people talk to me about their food cravings and find that food cravings are just incredibly tiring. In particular, if you really want to eat well and you're really trying hard to eat well, to look after your diet, but it seems like the more you're trying, the harder you're trying, the more you're thinking and worrying about food, and it becomes really, really stressful. And sometimes you really wonder, why am I craving food all the time? What does it actually mean? And there are a lot of theories why we crave food. Or maybe we need some vitamins or minerals that are missing. But I quite like to look at it from a different perspective of view. And today's perspective, I want to talk about the biological, the psychological, and the physiological reasons why you might be craving food. Let's look at the biological perspective. We are wired to seek pleasure, and we are wired to want what gives us pleasure. We find pleasure in intimacy, in sex. We also find pleasure in food. The reason why we need to find pleasure in it, because that's what keeps us alive. If, let's say, we didn't find any pleasure in sex, humanity would die out. We would not be living. If we didn't find pleasure in food, we would die as well, because we wouldn't be eating food. So why do we crave food? We crave food because this is what keeps us alive from a biological perspective. And we also crave food, especially that is pleasurable, so that is high palatable foods. And usually these are foods that are high in sugar, salt, and fat. And obviously companies know that, so they design food that is incredibly pleasurable. So we get addicted to seeking and receiving that pleasure, like we get addicted to drugs. We get addicted to the way it makes us feel. So again, it's that need for pleasure. It's because this is what keeps us alive and keeps the humanity alive. Now think about if, for example, we go on a diet, or there are certain food groups that we tell ourselves we shouldn't be having, or we're not eating enough calories because we're exercising more and not eating enough, or we're skipping meals. Now that one thing that keeps us alive or that we need for survival, that's now scarce. It's not available. So if it's not available, what will our brain do? Our brain will really stress that this is what we need, because it goes into that survival mode, into that instinct that what we need to survive, to keep going, to keep the humanity going, but also just to keep and to stay alive, it's now not available. So the brain will go into it doing its job, really. It will want you to eat food. So it becomes then also the psychological reason. We as humans, we want what we can't have. And maybe you remember those commercials on TV when they were screaming, really screaming, those late night commercials, screaming to you, only 5 pieces left, it's only limited edition, we won't get it again, we're running out of time, so you better purchase it right now. Why are they doing that? Because something is scarce, something is limited, you won't be getting it later on. So now your brain kicks in and thinks, oh my God, there's urgency and there's not enough of it. I might need to have it now. So we want it even more. And that's the same what happens with food. It becomes even more appealing. Another psychological reason is, think about it. When you were a little baby, your mom was giving you food. She was holding in your hand, was soothing you until you fall asleep. You learned very, very early on to connect love and connection and soothing with food. Later on, as you were growing up, maybe you learned that if you were good and cleaned up your room as a treat, now you're gonna get a lolly. So again, now as an adult, you continue exactly that modeled and learned behavior, which is you, after a long week, after a long day, you want to treat yourself, so therefore you go and eat something. From a psychological perspective, these are memories. We are craving a certain feeling. We are eating that food because it makes us feel something. Yeah. So we are craving the feeling and believe that food will give us. It's that vehicle to get that feeling that we're wanting. We want we want comfort, we want soothing, we want to relax. Now, physiological perspective. Again, if you're, for example, not eating enough calories, if you're, for example, not eating enough food, skipping meals, or you're avoiding certain food groups, your body will need those calories. Very simple. That is a pretty straightforward thing. Maybe your blood sugar is going up and down. Maybe you are eating food that are spiking your blood sugar, and then after a while it drops. So now you're craving food to bring it up again. Or your body's just trying to catch up on calories. Maybe during the day, maybe you skipped your breakfast, maybe you didn't have morning tea and then just had a salad for lunch. Now you will be craving food in the evening. Your body will want to catch up on those calories because you didn't eat enough during the day. So I guess the question is, what do I do with it? So I give you just only a few ideas where to start, because obviously everyone is different, and I would work with everyone individually and look, especially if it's on psychological reasons, then we will look into what is it that you're really longing for, what is it that you're seeking, what is that real need of yours. To get out of that survival instinct, to survival mode, I guess, we need to eat adequate amount of food. We need to eat all food groups. We need to eat food that gives us pleasure, because remember, we are seeking pleasure. We're naturally seeking pleasure anyway, so we need to integrate food that gives us that pleasure, because otherwise, if we're not having it, if we're eating food that doesn't give us pleasure, and if it's kind of like not even satisfying, what happens is that you will want to go and find that pleasure later on. So you will be seeking that pleasure anyway. So might as well, when you eat, ask yourself, what would really satisfy me? How much of it? And then eat really adequate and regular meals. Now, from a psychological perspective, this is where I call it uncoupling. So we need to uncouple food from those feelings. And we need to look into, what is that need that you're having? What is the need that you have? Do you want comfort, soothing? So we need to find other ways to give that to ourselves. But also looking into those old stories. What are the stories? What is it that your brain is telling you about food? So a lot of it is learning to manage ourselves in much better ways. For example, the other day I was talking to a client of mine, and when we broke down her needs and stories, she was saying that, for example, she separated from her partner, from her husband, and for her that meant that she wasn't good enough. So when these feelings of not good enough came up, she would be eating food to comfort herself. So this is psychological need here. What we need to go back to is that feeling of not being good enough, and look into, why do you feel like you're not good enough? What is the story that you're telling yourself? And the story was, well, my husband left me for someone else, therefore I'm not good enough. But is that the truth? So what we did is we looked into why someone might be leaving, and that has nothing to do with her, because we don't have control over what other people are doing. We don't have control over whether other people like us or not. It's up to them to decide whether they like us or not. It's up to other people to decide, do they join us in our life? Are they becoming friends or a relationship? And vice versa. So it's both ways. So it's never just only one way. And by trying to, I guess, be a certain way or be a certain person, we feel like, oh, if I am that way, if I behave that way, that other person will like me and will stay with me forever. That is not the truth. We don't have that control. It's a mutual decision to stay together. So now she was feeling like she wasn't good enough, she took all that decision why he left on herself, because she's the only reason. She's not. He is making his own decisions. It has nothing to do with her. She was being herself. He was being him. So when we uncouple that need, she could feel a relief in here. You see, we need to really go back into what are the emotional needs here and uncoupling those stories that are creating the suffering. So if we can eliminate or reduce that suffering, then the need to look for comfort and soothing in food goes away as well. So that's where we go right back to the triggers, instead of just working on those superficial symptoms, like, for example, trying to have strong willpower and not eat it. If you have any questions, leave your questions below in the comments, and I will come on and reply, give you answers and reply to your questions.